I don't think that the intervention of this coalition is serious enough compared with what we see from the strength of ISIS.
To defeat an enemy, one of any size, any strength, you must have a solid strategy and not get suckered into fighting the way the bad guys want you to. That makes for a chaotic attack, and often it spells defeat. And thus brings up a number of strategy questions about how Jordan is fighting ISIS, the possible American endgame, and a show of force that might indeed be playing into the hands of terrorists. It's a pleasure to welcome back into MidPoint former intelligence officer and advisor to General David Petraeus, retired U.S. Army Colonel Derek Harvey. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us again.
Great to be here.
Colonel, we now hear that the Jordanian ground forces are moving. There are thousands of them now massing against the border on Iraq. Is this a next step, a logical next step as they try to take the fight to ISIS?
Well, it's more a show of force, and eventually Jordan might be able to play a minor role in clearing some operations in western Iraq or in southeastern Syria. But, you know, it's very unlikely that Jordan is going to really have a significant contribution to a ground campaign. They've got limited capabilities. It's more noise than anything else at this point.
All right, now let's get to that. Are we just kidding ourselves and the world also as well when they look at the king and King Abdullah really did the right thing, stood up, said that we're going to destroy them? But do we need to pull back a little bit and face a little reality here? Wonderful. Jordan's there. The UAE is back in the bombing campaign. But this is not what will turn the tide against this enemy, correct?
Clearly it won't. The coalition remains fundamentally weak and full of contradictions. There is no real strategy. As President Barzani of the Kurdish government said this week, the problem is that there is no strategy for Syria. And if you don't deal with the Syrian problem, you're not going to be able to resolve the Iraqi problem over the long haul.
And when we talk about the Syrian problem, though, isn't at the end of the day, isn't that removing the leadership in Syria and basically taking over the country, gutting the country in many ways? Isn't that where we would have to get to at the end of the day?
Well, there are a lot of things one could do to impact ISIS without toppling the Assad regime for now. A no-fly zone, a no-go zone, meaning no Syrian military or Shia militias supported by Iran would be allowed to operate in parts of the country, and then open up the targeting campaign more aggressively in Syria, really arm the Sunni Arabs that we could work with, arm the Kurds, and arm Sunni Arabs that are in the southeast part of the country that we've really been neglecting so far.
Colonel, isn't it getting a little tiresome, though, even for you and many people that you speak to, when you and I meet or you and any others meet and we talk about this on a regular basis? It's the same thing. Arm the Kurds, no-fly zone. We continue to push what seems to be sound military strategy out into the space, but it completely gets lost. This has got to be weighing not only on you and I, but the people who are watching us, but the military themselves, the people there who know what they can do, and the people who basically are walking around in handcuffs.
Well, there are a lot of options that are available to Central Command and Special Operations Command and others. Unfortunately, there's a very tight leash. They've not been given a real good, clear mission set with the authorities to act. There's a long screwdriver coming out of the White House that really even limits a lot of consideration in the Pentagon.
Wait a minute, that long screwdriver coming out of the White House, is it doing anything of any, and seriously, are they doing anything of an effective nature that we can at least point to and say, here's something that might be a good idea?
Well, they're trying to manage the campaign in a way to keep the United States from becoming bogged down. Unfortunately, that's a good goal. Unfortunately, they have an either or. It's either 200,000 troops go in, or you continue with an ineffectual, insufficient campaign that is mainly political and not really directed at protecting our interests or changing the situation on the ground. There is a middle ground, and they just will not take it for ideological reasons.
Are we even smart enough at this point to fight an ideological war against the likes of ISIS?
Well, we've been feeding into the ISIS narrative with our comments. The president's comments about crusades at the prayer breakfast fed into the ISIS narrative about the Sunni Arab communities are under attack. Shia militias and others are saying that the U.S. is their air force and is supporting Shia militia activity directed at Sunni Arab communities. And so ISIS uses all of that to feed this messaging that they have that's very effective on social media to build up their own support. We're not very good at this.
All right. Stand by if you would, please, Colonel. We've got more to talk about. Other side of the break, we're going to also include into this discussion the strategy in cyberspace, because there's news about that now. And if America really needs another governmental agency to deal with a growing threat, there is no doubt that cybersecurity is a big issue. But don't we have enough people already to take care of that? We may not. MidPoint will continue. Welcome back to MidPoint. Retired U.S. Army Colonel, 26 years, an intelligence officer and Middle East Foreign Area Officer, Derek Harvey. Colonel, let me read something for you here, because this is coming out in a report right now from NBC News. It says that Washington isn't ignoring the Kurds out of spite. It's dragging its feet out of concern that those weapons, which they would give the Kurds, would not just be used against ISIS and would eventually serve another cause, Kurdish independence. What would be so bad about that?
Well, I think that they're mixing apples and oranges here, providing the types of weapons that the Kurds need, small arms, munitions, mortars, and crew-served weapons that provide like machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns and the like, is not going to tip the balance of power between Baghdad and the Kurdish regional government. It just won't. But we have not provided the Kurds what they need, and it's unfortunate, and it's really driven by not understanding the power relationships.
Well, the Kurds need guns, but isn't it fair to say they really have no place else to go? It's either us or nothing.
Well, the Germans have stepped up, and there are some other opportunities, but they really are looking to America as the major benefactor. And we do have, interest there. We've had a long-term relationship. It's been built upon over the last 22 years or more since the first Gulf War. So I think we have a responsibility, and these are good people with, human rights, making real progress, a real area of progress in the region, and we should support them.
Let me ask you about Ashton Carter here, because he very likely will be the U.S. Defense Secretary very soon. He basically issued a statement recently, talked about tough NATO action against Russia's influence in Eastern Europe. It sounds almost at this point that while he is taking over American defense, he's basically saying we need to push people like NATO and others not to do our bidding for us, but to at least get involved and do some of the heavy lifting. He may say that, but here's a two-part question. Do you think Ashton Carter will really be able to change any policy in his position? And number two, do you really think NATO is willing or able to do anything at all in the fights?
One, Ashton Carter's a very knowledgeable and smart man. He's a good bureaucrat. He understands the Department of Defense very well. But he has not been brought in to help shape policy at that level. It's really being managed in the White House. Number two, NATO has got a degree of incoherence within it. They're really afraid of provoking Russia at this point in time, which I think is the wrong read. Russia will be a bully and is going to take advantage of weakness. And that's what NATO and the United States is projecting today, is weakness in regard to Eastern Europe.
How much of a problem and how much of an issue is that incoherence that you mentioned with NATO? Because if Putin knows it, you know it, I know it, and everybody else knows it, doesn't it basically mean that this is a useless organization to begin with, at least when we consider these various fights?
It's not performing very well in regard to Eastern Europe and the border with Russia. Latvia, Estonia, the Baltic countries, Poland, they all have significant concerns about the reliability of NATO and the United States. But NATO has done some things fairly well over the last decade. If you look at the Balkans, you look at their role in Afghanistan, and you look at the Libyan campaign, it did provide a capability and a lot of leadership in that regard. It's about picking the right place to use NATO. But in this type of a situation, there's just too much concern and fear in the capitals of Europe, and they do not want to provoke. They want a deal, and they want to give Putin enough to have him go away. Unfortunately, he'll just come back for more.
Well, not only that, but he understands that everybody just wants him to go away, and it's appeasement more than anything else. Apparently, and this is shifting now to cyber security, the Obama administration wants a brand new agency to combat the deepening threat from cyber attacks. So it's another agency in here. In your opinion, do we need another agency, or do we have enough people here that can get the job done now? It just seems like we're just loading up with more governmental basic problems, if you will, dams, things that keep people from getting things done.
I think you're absolutely right. It's another response of creating another bureaucracy, layering more on top of more, and it's excessive. There's enough capability. Make the organizations do what they're supposed to do and resource them to do it. If they're not doing it, change the leadership. I would look at the Director of National Intelligence. The large bureaucracy of DNI, in my judgment, really has not enhanced the intelligence operations of the United States. The net effect, I think, has been detrimental at huge cost.
Is this all basically just a dodge by the president? Let's see if we can just shovel everything off here and maybe get down to 2016 and let somebody else take care of it?
Well, I think they're muddling through. It's a political response. Create another organization. Homeland Defense is another one of those types of organizations that at the end of the day, we've created something that is a monster.
Colonel, we have to talk about that one of these days because we're all out of time right now. But indeed, the Department of Homeland Security, a lot of the money and a lot of the people there, that is indeed something else the American people are wondering if really it is indeed money being well spent. Colonel Derek Harvey, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Thank you so much.
Take care.
You too. They are considered by many to be the future of American politics. One group of people who supposedly, and we are told this by many people, have a firm and a much better grasp on what this country needs, beginning with the next president. They are the libertarians. Who exactly are they? And what are they? It's coming up next, right here on MidPoint.